Hi everyone. One of the frequently asked questions that I get are how to prevent hamstring injuries. So in our first segment of Ask the Coach, that's what we're going to talk about, how do you prevent hamstring injuries. There's really three major causes of hamstring injuries. The first one really has to do with speed and strength. As a general rule of thumb, you always want, in your training week, you always want to do speed before strength. You never want to do strength before speed. And there's some other rules there, but if you have to do strength first in the week, then you just need to make sure that speed is a lot later in the week, at least 3 days later in the week. So that's the first rule. That's a very common thing that people do to get a hamstring injury. They'll do heavy squat workout, and then the next day they'll do a speed workout, and then pop, you get a hamstring tear. The second thing is adhesions. It's very easy to get scar tissue built up in the muscle if you're not doing things to prevent that, if you're not using recovery techniques to stop that from happening, and if you're not balancing your heavy work with some lower intensity work throughout the week. You can't go hard all the time. You have to have a balance between the hard stuff and then your easier alternate exercises, so like single leg work, for example. The third thing is improper motor patterns. So for example, when you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, your squats, your deadlifts, your Olympic lifts are all great lifts for building up strength in the hamstrings, the lower back, and the glutes. But the problem is, with a squat, the hardest part of the squat is actually the bottom. So that puts you in a position where your knee is up and you're having to push it down. So in other words, it's hardest in this position. The same thing is true for, let's say, a Romanian deadlift. I'm going to walk around here so you can see them a little better here. In a Romanian deadlift, the hardest part is right here. So this is where you're putting the most stress on the hamstring, is in this position. That's equivalent to this position. Well, normally where a hamstring pull occurs is during a sprint, is in the paw. It's in that foot contact as you extend the hip. Usually it's very common to get a high hamstring pull in that position. Well, the problem is that you've created this strength, okay, but you've done it in the wrong position in the motion, okay. You haven't done any in the extended position, the hip extended position, or enough there anyway. And then the second thing is you haven't trained the right motor patterns. So the muscles are meant to fire in a specific sequence, and those sequences are different for different activities. So they're not the same for sprinting as they are for a deadlift or a squat or even an Olympic lift. So you need to do transfer exercises for that. So that's where something like this glute ham comes in. This is a sore neck glute ham. It's a very nice glute ham. It's adjustable. So this glute ham, you're going to be able to adjust the glute ham forward and back to make sure you're in the right position as far as your hip contact. You can also adjust the platform as well as this roller pad up and down to make sure it's in the right position to work what you want. The second thing is it's a very sturdy, very durable glute ham. It's meant to be loaded. So in other words, you can do your glute hams with weight. And the other nice thing is the hip pad on these. Each one of these hip pads is about this wide. So all in all, this is about this wide. It's a gigantic glute ham. So it's comfortable for athletes. Tend to be a little bit more muscular. It's a more comfortable way of doing the glute ham. So there are some other exercises that we'll target in a different video. But for today, we're just going to talk about the glute ham. Now, the nice thing about a glute ham, I'm going to demo this in just a moment. The stress on the hamstring is the greatest when you're in a horizontal position. All right. Well, that's also where it's the greatest in sprinting. That's where your foot hits the ground. You're in that hip extended position. So the glute ham is going to mimic that. It's going to put the force the highest in the hip extended position. The other thing it does is the hamstring is a double joint muscle. In other words, it crosses the knee and it crosses the hip. So, a hamstring curl, that's really only hitting the lower part of the hamstring. It's hitting the part that crosses the knee. Whereas your Romanian deadlift is going to hit the upper part of the hamstring more. This is going to do both. So it's going to go glute, lower back, upper part of the hamstring, lower part of the hamstring. And it's going to mimic the motor firing pattern that you get with sprinting, which is going to be glute first, hamstring, lower back, which is how it should occur. So developing these proper motor patterns is very, very important for making sure that things are firing in the right order when you're sprinting. It reduces your risk for a hamstring injury, and it also reduces the risk for a lower back injury. And I will tell you, anyone who has ever had a hamstring injury is also set up for a lower back injury. So it's very important that you're doing this for more than one reason. One, prevention of the hamstring pull, and two, prevention of a back injury later on. So we're going to demo the proper way to do a glute ham. This is a hard exercise, so make sure that you start off with no weight. You really want to be able to do several sets of at least 6 to 8 reps here before you start adding any weight. This is a power exercise. You can use slow eccentrics, but you always want to fire hard on the way up. So again, we're trying to mimic those motor patterns that you get with sprinting, so it needs to be very explosive. And then with the weight, there's a lot of different ways to use your tempos to add weight. You can do heavy isometrics and things like that. Those are more advanced techniques. You can also use bands. But again, you want to wait on those until you can do several sets of at least 6 to 8 reps. And probably 6 to 8 is probably your ideal range here. Should be your average range for your reps. You can do a little more. You can go down as low as 3 or 4. But on average, about 6 to 8 reps for this exercise to target a posterior chain. When you set up your distance here, what you want is that in the down position, you really want the center of this hip pad to be just below your hip. You can see, again, the center of the hip pad just below the hip itself. Now I'm going to start down here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is bring myself up, and you can see I'm going to keep my toes in contact, but they're not doing anything yet. The first thing I'm going to do is bring myself up to parallel. Okay, so this again is lower back, and then you see the toes are going to begin to dig. I'm going to pull myself all the way up. Nice and slow on the way down, make sure you're controlling it. Now we're going to put this in full speed. You can see you really have 2 distinct motions here. Hip, knee. Hip, knee. Okay, now when you get into, again I'm going to speed this up a little bit, we're going to go back into full speed. So that was probably about 70%. So what this looks like in full speed. So again, great exercise. Glute ham's a pretty hard piece of equipment to find. You're not going to find a local gym that has it, most likely. If you do, it's typically going to be a gym that targets athletes. That's where you want to go. You can purchase these from Sorinex if you want one for yourself, but they're best mixed into your program. So unless you have a full gym at home, it's not really a huge advantage. So again, great exercise. It's a good transfer exercise, great for preventing hamstring issues. It's great for speed and great for power production. Hope you guys have a great day, and hope this is something that you can put into your training protocol to help develop your athleticism. Thank you.